we always have trade-offs in life. And it occurred to me that the only way to convert between time and money, or a dollar today and a dollar 10 years from now, is to have a conversion factor, right? Think back to engineering. You need a conversion factor. And human opinion is that conversion factor. And so the optimization doesn't know the conversion. We have to include the people, the opinions, to actually be able to optimize anything.
Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of the Decision Intelligence Lab podcast. We are recording during Thanksgiving week and releasing prior to December, so we want to wish all of you listeners a happy holidays. This is a special issue for other reasons as well. We've got our first repeat visitors to the Decision Intelligence Lab podcast, Borja Menéndez Moreno, who's created the Advent of OR, a project that we're going to talk about today, and Zohar Strinka, who's been a key contributor to the Informs Analytics framework that is really deeply and directly connected to the themes of the Advent of OR. They're joining us today to talk about these new initiatives. So welcome, Zohar and Borja. It's great to have you both back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Borja, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about the Advent of OR, what inspired you to launch it, and what kind of need in the OR and the analytics community are you trying to address with the Advent of OR?
So this year is the second edition of the Advent of OR. The first one was in 2024, and it was inspired mainly by the Advent of Code, in which participants of the Advent of Code receive one task each day, in which they code something in the end, and they advance in their knowledge about coding in whatever knowledge they want. So that was like the main idea of the Advent of OR in 2024. So I just released one optimization problem per day for 24 days in a row. It was kind of difficult, as you can imagine. So this year I wanted to switch a bit the focus, and I wanted to address one problem that I can see repeatedly in operations research environments, which is students and early career practitioners focus mainly on the math modeling side or the algorithmic side of an optimization problem. But when you get optimization problems in businesses, there are many other things to do, right? And starting from framing the problem and then understanding data and maybe doing some assumptions and then step by step trying to get to a model of the reality that they have and iteratively improving it somehow because you are speaking with different stakeholders with different needs, and you need to incorporate those needs iteratively because you don't really understand them from the very beginning, right? You don't have all the data from the very beginning. So yeah, those are like the main questions that I wanted to address, as well as the communication issues that we may have when speaking with other stakeholders in businesses and so on.
Well, Borja, that's terrific. And at a personal level, it's sort of music to my ears because it's kind of where my column and my book project and a lot of my focus is around essentially the other components of the value chain beyond the modeling and the traditional technical components. Zohar, on that note, please kind of give us some background on the Informs Analytics framework and kind of why it was needed, how it evolved, and what it's trying to do for the community.
Absolutely. So the Informs Analytics framework was almost a byproduct, but it was an intentional byproduct of an effort last year in 2024 by Informs to start having 3 levels of certification. So for over a decade, we had this CAP expert or this certified analytics professional, and it was really aimed at what's all the stuff you need to do well in order to manage and run an analytics project or program. And it was missing all the other people at all the lower levels, the entry-level folks, the mid-level folks. And so there was a vision from Informs to really come out with something that spoke to all 3 levels, people doing the hands-on work, more entry-level, people maybe managing a project, and then people more at that program level, how do you work with the business? How do you figure this all out? And so that was the original vision. And as we got into defining those 3 roles and the expertise, there were several people who are on this expert team who are very opinionated. This is more than just a standard for 3 exams. This is a standard for the profession. This is a script for analytics in practice. And they had evidence from the first version at that expert level where they had already been using it sort of as a script, as a checklist. But now, as we expanded, as we added the 3 levels, it became more than that. It was more comprehensive. And we put all this time into refining, like, just even when we start the first domain, business problem question framing, because sometimes you don't have a problem to solve even yet. You're starting from a question. And so there was just so much effort put into defining what's it mean to be successful in analytics and how do we guide people through that process.
Oh, that's excellent. And immediately as I listened to the two of you introduce these two projects, I didn't realize they were on such similar timelines as well. The Advent starting in 2024 and the analytics framework kind of coming out in 2024. I, I I'd love to have both of you tell me how you respond to people who think OR is just about the math.
Sure. I have spent a lot of time thinking about
I
this
know.
because I think when you learn the math, my claim is you treat problem solving differently. And so I've done a lot of presentations and writing on this, but with optimization, especially when you learn optimization tools, you set up the problem, the answer is implied. And so the only thing we can do to get better answers is to change the problem, make it easier to solve, make it somehow better in practice. And so to me, that is the core intuition of learning optimization, which almost anyone in OR will learn some optimization. And so if you take that with you in the rest of your life, you start to ask a lot more questions about the problem. Because once we've agreed on that, once we have it settled, this is the problem we're going to solve, you're kind of stuck. You're limited. You're only ever going to get so far. Your objective function is constrained by those constraints. And so if you want a higher objective, higher revenues, whatever it might be, you have to negotiate the requirements or we're never going to get there. So to me that's really what's core in OR is that mindset, and that's why the problem's so central.
Excellent. Borja, your perspective for the people who think OR is just about the math.
Yeah, sure. I've also spent a lot of time thinking about this because in the end, it's what we why we are here, right? And what we practitioners need to answer first is why do we need optimization after all? Because in the end, we are trying to answer the questions of the decisions being made in every business. So we need to shift the focus on the decision workflow inside a business and understanding that math is just only one piece of it because you also need context, you need data quality, you need stakeholder communication. There are also a plethora of things that you need to get right in order to get the solution for your problem. Even the optimization problem that you are tackling at that moment, you need to incorporate all that knowledge into that because otherwise the math is useless.
Yeah, I mean, and it breaks my heart, but it's absolutely true that um, I often feel like we build very, very engineering compliant, specification conforming bridges that don't cross the river all the way, and that the math that we produce is very often extremely rigorous and on point, and yet as Borges, as you said, the decision problem doesn't get solved, and for a variety of reasons. Um,
Vijay,
yes,
I just wanted
please.
to add one thing there of I noticed recently that so we always have trade-offs in life. And it occurred to me that the only way to convert between time and money, or a dollar today and a dollar 10 years from now, is to have a conversion factor, right? Think back to engineering. You need a conversion
Yes.
factor. And human opinion is that conversion factor. And so the optimization doesn't know the conversion. We have to include the people, the opinions, to actually be able to optimize anything.
Right, because I think in the end, those people are the ones accountable. They're the ones that get in trouble if things don't go well. They're the ones that get rewarded if things do.
They're
And
the ones making the decisions, right?
yes, and even in an automated world, they're the ones monitoring those decisions and having to answer for them. Uh, Borja, can you talk a little bit, because I definitely got a sense from your initial answer that the advent has shifted from last year to this year. Can you talk a little bit about the types of skills that you think participants this year will be developing by participating?
Sure. The kind of skills that participants will develop for 24 days this year will be strictly related with the life cycle of an optimization project, right? From the very beginning to the end. So, um, since we start the advent of war by framing a specific problem inside the portfolio optimization uh, kind of problems, we are going to structure the problem. We are manage some assumptions because in the end, I will try to mimic what the conversations with different stakeholders should happen. So, for example, in different days, we are going to cover different parts of the company and different stakeholders. So, at the very beginning, participants will have some knowledge about the problem, but as each day passes through, we are going to cover like different steps, and they are going to incorporate that knowledge into the mathematical model. So they are going to see how a mathematical model will evolve over time in order to get the business decisions right. So this is like the main core skill set that they are going to get during the advent of war. So they are going to do scenario testing. They are going to monitor the KPIs, how they evolve over time depending on the stakeholders' needs. They are going to incorporate different constraints or even decide if it's a constraint or an objective function in the end. So they are going to develop that kind of skills that are truly important when solving decision problems in businesses.
Well, it's excellent. And Borja, as you were speaking, Zohar, I couldn't help but hear an echo of something you had said earlier and on the previous podcast around kind of continually refining and updating the shape of the problem. Um, Having heard Borja's description about the advent of our Zohar, I'd love to get your perspective on how you feel like this would be valuable for someone pursuing the certified analytics professional certifications at any or all levels. How the advent of OR might support that journey.
I think one of the biggest things that I heard is this whole idea of revisiting the problem. It's hard to see what might change without that hands-on experience. And so I think it's good to really give people a guided exposure to, yeah, you should ask more questions here because you forgot to include the stakeholder, and giving someone a really first person experience of that and what are the consequences of forgetting, because that's what you get if you work in industry is
Yes.
at least once you've gotten enough weeks or months or years under your belt, you're going to have that experience where you thought you knew everything and you didn't, and you missed something and it changes everything. And so this sort of gives you a guaranteed exposure to that, which to me is a big part of why the Informs Analytics framework is so valuable, making it more personal, right? Of why do you need to keep revisiting it? Why do you need to follow this structure? It's because if you don't, you might miss something. So let's ask ourselves, did we ask all the stakeholders? Let's check the data. Wait, does this actually work for the question we're trying to answer? Or do we need to refine our question? And so I really think that first person experience is valuable. We designed the CAP Essentials, that entry level version, so you could study your way to passing it. So you wouldn't need to have had that experience of things blowing up in your face and kind of going back and saying, "Okay, let's see what we're even trying to accomplish here." But what you're describing, Portia, sounds great for giving you that first person experience of why does it matter? Why do we need to be looking ahead?
And this, I guess, is a question initially for Borja, but Zohar, I'm probably going to come back to you on this one as well to get your perspective. Uh, Borja, I feel like there's an emphasis in the intro to the advent of OR about building a system and about engineering. In I- is I What are we missing when we teach and write about OR without talking about those things, or and how might we teach those things better? And how are you trying to bring those ideas across in the advent of OR? How's that for a five-part question?
Yeah, what I think in this regard is, as said I think that at the very beginning is that academia's trying to focus solely on mathematical modeling and algorithmic um, expertise, right? And this is just part of something bigger. And that something bigger is a system that you need to build in order to respond to the questions from the business, the decision problems that they have in the end. So that's the main idea of the advent of war, like building a system that in the end gets you to the final solution for the business, not just a solution for an optimization problem from the most mathematical way of speaking in this way, right? So that's the main thing. And in order to do that, you need to understand that software engineering practices or good practices are here to help. And in the end, we need to also understand that these mathematical models that we build will live inside a product. And part of the product needs to be engineered, needs to be coded, right? And you need to build something like the optimization engine. So how do you connect that optimization engine with the rest of the product in order to give solutions to the business? So that's the whole thing about the systems and the engineering part of the advent of OR.
Yeah. Zohar, what I'd love to get your perspective, kind of taking off your Informs hat perhaps and putting on your consultant hat around kind of the importance of thinking in terms of building a system and in terms of engineering a solution.
I so the way I do that wearing my consultant hat is I have to have foresight. And so I think there is really good value to learning the math and making sure you really understand the implications of like that tiny tweak to the algorithm or to the model. And so if you remove a constraint from your model and it wasn't a binding constraint, it's not going to change the solution. And some of that intuition is really what I bring into that system view of, okay, they're going to give me 100 requirements. I only need to worry about the binding ones. I only need to negotiate the binding ones that I think they don't really mean it. And so for me, there's sort of this aspect of understanding the consequences of the requirements and how they're going to impact the future system. Oh, we don't need to bring in the end users. They'll just do what we tell them. No, I have worked on enough projects where the end users had really good insights. No, we're not going to skip the end users. Sorry. And so, really being able to figure out which of those things in the system could doom the project and making sure that you're handling them up front or as soon as possible or as soon as practical, but keeping in mind that system that your solution will fit into is really the way I'd answer that question.
Excellent, excellent. And kind of on that note, it's another question from Mike that I think is a really interesting one, which is, um, and it's open to both of you because I'm really interested in where both of you come down on this. Um, we build all kinds of different OR systems, sometimes one-time analyses or tools for one-time use to tackle one problem, sometimes standalone systems, sometimes engines that are plugged into existing workflow and existing systems. Where do we learn about those trade-offs between in about sort of how these different types of solutions need different type of thinking? Both of you seem very comfortable kind of working across that spectrum, but none of us, when we came out of school, were all that comfortable. I'm curious as to kind of how you've learned to kind of look at those types of trade-offs and make those types of assessments and decisions.
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in then
Please.
of, I think you learn through experience is a big piece of it and talking to the users. Those are the 2 things. So, um, my first project, I got to talk to the users and I started making them promises because they seemed to have very reasonable requests. And then I got burned a few months later when I learned their reasonable requests were not achievable. And so you have to sort of learn to talk to the users and understand what their experience of this is. How are they making these decisions today? How can your tool help? And then really listen to what they're saying and try to match that against the models you can actually build, the tools you can build, the one-off analysis, whatever it might be. But really, I find talking to the users and understanding how they make these choices today and using that to inform that future state maybe asking them some questions. How would this work? Would this make your life better? No, because it's missing all this information. And the other piece is prototyping, right? So really getting a first version of the model that you can get in their hands and say, would this be helpful? How would you use this? And really iterating from there. So iteration, talking to users, and experience is how I think we usually get those skills.
Excellent. And there's something in there, Zohar, in your response that I wanted to call out, and that was too often we're quick to start conceiving of a massive system and a turnkey system. And what you sort of articulated is both through conversation and through prototyping, we kind of develop our understanding of whether such a system will ultimately be valuable, and if so, what it might look like. That's really an important notion that I don't quite know why, but I blame the people that came before us. I blame the automation architects and the people putting in systems of record that were simply aggressively trying to build systems to automate existing processes that were linear, deterministic, and kind of could be checked. And somehow we've often brought that same systems building approach to decision-based systems, which are quite different from that. Borja, I know you have a lot to say on this. I want to throw it over to you.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that I've learned through time is that there's one sentence that I've read in plenty of spaces, which is engage the users or the stakeholders early in the project. To me, it is a meaningful sentence, but I always try to get more of that, meaning that it is not only needed to engage the users early in the project, but also during the project, even though it means more work for you, for sure. But the idea is, at least to me, not to engage them early and through the project, but for you to become a user. Because in the end, if you become a user of the thing that you are going to produce and the thing that they are doing in their daily activities, you are going to get more nuances and you are in a better position to understand what are their pain points and how to solve them. So to me, that's one of the key reasons of these kind of frameworks, the analytics framework and also the advent of R exist, because in the end you need to understand that without them, without the stakeholders, and without approaching them in a proper way, you won't be useful for them. You won't be building something that adds value to the business, and that's the ultimate goal, right? You need to add value to the business. Otherwise, it's just a play, a game for you, right?
Uh,
Yeah, I mean, in a way. Oh, Zohar, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the thing that came to mind as you were talking is curiosity. So I've had some discussions with folks that like you need to have curiosity if you're in operations research because it really helps you ask those questions and kind of explore the data and wear that hat. Like pretend I'm the user. How would I use this? Oh, I don't have this information. I should make that information available. And so that curiosity is really valuable to move your solutions forward.
Yeah, it's interesting in a way that, in my theory is that we haven't had those kinds of skill development as part of our academic journeys for a variety of reasons. One of which is at the core, it's hard. It's hard to develop instructive, experience-based things that within the context of our educational systems are easy to evaluate, not time-consuming, and not kind of covering up the depth of the harder mathematical stuff that's also real. Um, with that said, Borja, I'm really interested in how you go about designing the challenges for the advent of OR, because you're trying to. I can tell from talking to you, you're trying to make them fun, but also meaningful and also real. Can you share a little bit about your process of developing the challenge?
Sure. And it's strictly related with what you just said. It is pretty difficult from an academic setting to introduce students to real life business problems. So, with that in mind, what I wanted from the advent of OR is to bring that realism into the challenge. And how did I get to that realism? Well, by just the experience of working from the industry, of course, but also getting all those nuances on understanding the stakeholders' needs and so on, and try to mimic that life cycle of an optimization project from the very beginning to the end. So that's like the very first point, like realism. If the advent of OR doesn't give you a realistic scenario from the business problem point of view, then it's useless because you have plenty of papers and plenty of data sets out there that are just for the sake of practicing the mathematical modeling and the algorithmic part, which are pretty important for sure. But we lack that part of the realism in academic settings, right? But of course, I also wanted to do it as simple as possible. So each day is strictly focused on one step of the process, no more than that. It is just a bit of theory, a bit of practice, and some questions for you as a participant to answer and try to, in the end, generate some debate around that. That's the main idea.
Excellent. Well, we're coming to wrap up, so I have one final question for each of you. And listeners, this is your moment to get out your pen and paper, even though we'll capture all of what they respond in the show notes as well. This is the opportunity to listen carefully and get some immediate connections to resources. Starting with you, Zohar, how can our listeners learn more about the Informs Analytic Framework, and how can they get on the path to the CAP, the Certified Analytics Professional, at the different levels?
Informs is building out a whole bunch of resources bit by bit. So we talked at the beginning that this is something where we put it together in 2024. 2025 has been a big building year as we're putting together resources, but we're going to invest even more in more resources. So the whole framework, you can download it if you go to Inform's website, search for Inform's Analytics Framework. It's easy to find, and you'll find it, and you just enter your email address, and you get the whole thing sent to your inbox. So that's that. And then there's the Certified Analytics Professional
Yes,
website,
yes,
which you can also go to. I'm sure they'll be in the show notes, those
yes.
links. And so you can just take a look over there and learn more about the 3 tiers and which one might fit you best. So those would be my suggestions. There's a mailing list with resources, and there's a bunch on the sites, but there's more to come too. So there's real value in being on that mailing list as the study guides come out and things like that.
Excellent. And Borja, today is November 20-something, and so December 1st, the kickoff of the advent of OR is coming up fast. Our goal is to get this podcast out in front of the world as soon as possible so that people have got an opportunity to participate in this year's advent of OR. Can you provide us with as much detail and suggestions about how to sign up and participate this
Yeah,
year?
sure. For sure. I mean, it's a completely free challenge. It's open to all levels, and I'm seeing people from academia, researchers, but also students and OR engineers already that are taking the challenge. And you can join from anywhere because it's remotely. And what they are going to receive, participants, is one email per day in which they will get some theory, some practice, and some tasks to do so they can advance in their life cycle management of an optimization project. So it is kind of a safe playground in order to understand what are the needed steps for going from I don't have a clue of what the problem is about to deploy the solution and gives meaningful responses to decision problems in businesses. I think it's a fun way to learn about OR.
Excellent. And is there an email address or a website where people can go quickly to sign up?
Sure, adventofOR.com, and that's it. They put their name, their email, hit the button, and then they start receiving emails.
Fantastic. I want to just close by both thanking both of you and acknowledging, from my perspective, how much I wish we had had resources like this when I was a young professional. Um, a lot of us, and perhaps you guys as well, have had to do the type of learning that the framework describes, that the advent of OR is advocating for, the hard way, through trying and failing and falling and doubting ourselves and questioning our training and all the life choices we made that led us to this particular project. And it's really terrific that we've got these resources to help people learn in a way that's more developmental and less painful. and really, in both cases, quite a lot of fun as well. So I want to thank you both for joining us on the podcast today and for your efforts to help educate the next generation of OR leaders and data science professionals who can leverage optimization and simulation and all the tools that we've got in our box in a way that makes a difference in the world. So thanks to you both, and happy holidays.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Vijay.
Vijay.
And listeners, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast at the Decision Intelligence Lab.substack.com. And thank you for listening, and happy holidays to you as well. That's it for this week.